Hey guys, Zot here, and welcome to another video. In this video, we're going to be looking at a skill all top players possess, and that's their ability to be one step ahead at all time. In all games, be it WoW or let's say chess, when playing against a good player, it always somehow seems that they are always able to predict your next move. This results in them always being one step ahead of you, but just how do top players do this? Well, in this video, we're going to be doing exactly that. And I'm going to be giving you a few examples where I myself am one step ahead of my opponent. Then I'll break down my thought process during the game. In this game, we've got me on Shadow Priest, playing 2v2 against a Mistweaver and a Warrior. Now I'll let you watch the clip. Okay, so I mind controlled the warrior, making him friendly and forcing the monk to cocoon himself. But that's just what you see on the surface. Top players are top players for a reason, and that's because this play wasn't luck, it wasn't random, it was simply knowing what your enemy is going to do before they even do it themselves. But how do I know? Well, I'm going to play the same clip and explain what's going on in my head and my thought process start to finish throughout the clip. Instantly, first thing I notice is that the monk uses his dispel on the warrior. Now, this is easy to keep track of. I can see that my Vampiric Touch and Shadow Word Pain have gone from the target, and also that his dispel is on cooldown. On top of that, I can also see that the monk is currently in a Sin and Punishment, a crowd control you get from dispelling Vampiric Touch. Now, this is obviously nothing special. Anybody can keep track of this, be it with add-ons or simply just some basic awareness. Anyway, the next problem I encounter is now I need to get my dots back up onto the target, but he has both Reflect and Pummel available, which I know from my Omnibar. So I use my global to dispel his envelop in mist, waiting for my Psychic Horror to come off cooldown, and then I stun the warrior in conjunction with a Scythe and proceed to get my dots up. Now, my thought process here so far is that I'm a Shadow Priest, I need my dots to do damage, but the warrior has two ways of stopping me available to him, from Reflect and Pummel, and as the healer has no dispel, I can easily use my stun here and proceed to get my dots up and get my pressure rolling once more. Seeing and listening to my thought process here is simple, right? I'm a Shadow Priest and I rely on my dots. It's fairly obvious I'm going to make this play and stun the warrior when you think about it, for these reasons we covered. Now, knowing all of that, if you was this warrior, what you could have done is used your Reflect the second my Psychic Horror came off cooldown, and reflected the stun back at me. This is the difference between top players. They take this thought process I have here and then apply it to their enemies. This warrior should have had the exact same thinking pattern as me. He should have put himself in my shoes and have known I was going to stun him. When I lay it all out, it's actually extremely easy to predict what your opponent is going to do, and it's how top players make these what seem like flashy plays, but instead all it boils down to is just good game understanding and knowing what's going on in the game currently. Okay, so let's continue with the clip. After I get my dots up in the stun, they get dispelled once more, which I notice using the same reasons from earlier. Now, with my game knowledge, I know that monks have another dispel, which as you probably know as well is Revival. Although I'm not tracking this on my Omnibar, I can easily see that my dots were removed once more, whilst the monk still had his normal dispel on cooldown from earlier. Now again, trying to get my dots up on the warrior, he still has both Reflect and Pummel available still. I know for a fact when I cast my next Vampiric Touch, he's going to either look to kick or reflect the ability. This is easy to tell because for one, he has it available, number two, he's in range, and he's a low amount of health already, so he's going to be trying to prevent as much damage as possible here in order to survive. So I tried to cast Vampiric Touch and then instantly fake cast, faking his pummel in the process. Now this was an extremely easy pummel to predict, for the reasons stated above. Now after that I instantly get stunned on my next cast, and the warrior's monk is coming out of crowd control. Now all he has to stop me getting my damage rolling is his reflect, but as his monk's out of crowd control, the warrior feels safe, so he goes into Bladestorm. Now with my game knowledge, I know warrior relies on Bladestorm for a huge chunk of their damage. I also know warriors are unable to reflect whilst Bladestorming, so knowing this, I just cast my Vampiric Touch and successfully apply it to the warrior, despite him having reflect available, shortly followed by a Mind Blast and Void Eruption. Okay, so now what I'm looking to do is land my fear, as during his Bladestorm my hamstring has dropped off. Now walking over to the monk, it's obvious what I'm wanting to do. It doesn't take some advanced game knowledge or a rocket scientist to know if a priest is walking over to you, it's likely that he's attempting to Psychic Scream you. And I know he knows that. So when I get in range, I hold my fear as he's a monk, so he's likely going to portal away. This same concept goes for all Night Elves as well, as Psychic Scream is an incredibly telegraphed ability as long as you know the range. It's very easy to shadow meld, so if he was a Night Elf here, I would have also waited. My Paladin luckily positioned in the right place to land a Repentance, so without a trinket, the monk is going to have to sit this fall, and it's going to give me the time to get there in order to land my Psychic Scream. Still with my fear, I head over to the monk looking to try and land my Psychic Scream. Noticing I'm not going to make it in time, I make a calculated aggressive play and use Dispersion for the freedom and movement speed increase to make it in time before the Repentance ends. Now I feel safe committing such a large defensive cooldown for a few reasons. First is that the warrior is already sub 50%. I personally know I have a lot more damage available for him, as I've currently got my Void form rolling. On top of that, I also have my silence for even more follow-up crowd control. Furthermore, if this CC chain ends or is interrupted, the warrior will either get healed or dispelled before the next CC lands, resulting in it being vital for me to chain the crowd control correctly. I secure the fear and then proceed to continue with damage. Forcing the warrior to use his rallying cry. Shortly after, the warrior charges me and uses his reflect in order to stay alive and prevent all damage, whilst I continue the crowd control chain with a silence. Now, at this point, I assess the situation in my head. The monk's silence is about to expire in 2 seconds, and me or my paladin have no follow-up crowd control, as he's already used Hammer of Justice as well as Repentance, and all mine's also on cooldown. The warrior is low, but as I know my class, I understand that despite him being low, I'm not going to be able to kill him here, as both my Void Bolt and Shadow Word Death, which are instant, are on cooldown, and he has Pummel available to interrupt me if I cast. Knowing he has Pummel, what I do is ask for a Blessing of Protection. This makes all physical abilities immune, including Pummel. Now at this point I begin to cast Mind Control. Why, you might ask? Well, I've not got enough damage to finish the warrior off. With my game knowledge, I also know that monks have 0 instant healing outside of Life Cocoon and Revival. And as we saw him using Revival a little earlier, what do you think he's going to do the instant his silence runs out, taking into account his warrior's health? Yes, exactly, it's simple, he's obviously going to Cocoon here. Even if he didn't, the warrior's rally would simply expire and he would die during my mind control. As the warrior's friendly, the monk ends up life cocooning himself and the warrior dies instantly after his rally expires. Okay, so this play was made possible for 2 reasons, and these 2 reasons are why professional and rank 1 players are always a step ahead. The first one being game knowledge. For instance, using myself as an example this game, alone thanks to my game knowledge, I knew that firstly, warriors are unable to reflect during their Bladestorm, unless they cancel it. Monks can portal to avoid crowd control, and also that Blessing of Protection makes you immune to interrupts. Also, my knowledge of monks allowed me to understand that he has no instant healing. What he does have though is a very short cooldown cocoon, something that they will almost always use if the target is low on health when coming out of a crowd control. Pair this all with my knowledge of how mind control works and you can see why. Now, I'm not saying this is extensive game knowledge by any means. Most of these things are commonly known, and I'm sure you guys watching this know most of it, if not all of it anyway. But it's applying this knowledge into your gameplay that makes the difference and allows you to be one step ahead. The second reason is game awareness. Now, this is your overall awareness and overview of the game. Your ability to assess the situation you're currently in, including opponents' cooldowns, opponents' defensives, their positioning. There are tons and tons of things happening in a game at any one time. You need to hone in on those that are going to be affecting your next move. So the simplest bit of game awareness is, I'm about to cast a spell. Does the target have an interrupt? Is he in range? Now you can take this a step further. For example, in this game, my awareness helped with a few things. First was dealing with his interrupts. I either removed them out of the equation with a stun, or recognised he was likely to kick me based on his health, his range, and the fact he had it available. Second was my ability to track their cooldowns. Things like interrupts, reflect, defensives, healing cooldowns. I had an understanding of what was up and when they were going to use it. Next was identifying my win condition. I'm only going to win this game in a CC chain. I recognised this and was able to identify that I was in a position to win and committed defensive cooldowns offensively. Combine both game knowledge with good awareness in-game and you too can be one step ahead of your opponents at all times. Thanks for watching, and be sure to plus skill and leave a comment if you enjoyed this video.